They lived in luxury, wielded unseen power, and walked a tightrope between comfort and danger. But what became of the women who shared the lives of notorious drug kingpins? Did they stay loyal or become informants? Were they victims or accomplices? In this video, we look into the untold stories of the wives of infamous drug lords, uncover their fates and the surprising choices they made in a world of violence, wealth, and relentless pursuit. Victoria DiGiorgio, wife to John Joseph Gotti, the notorious head of the Gambino crime family. You see, John Gotti is a name synonymous with crime, but what do you expect? He was raised in an environment famous for criminal activities. Born on October 27, 1940, in the Bronx borough of New York City, John Gotti was the fifth of 13 children, that is minus 2 of his siblings, who died at birth. John and Fanny, Gotti's parents, just happen to love children even though they have so little to raise them. The financial struggle affected the whole family in every aspect, and to make things worse, they moved to Brooklyn's East New York neighborhood, which at the time was a hotbed for gang activity, when Gotti was just 12 years old. That was how Gotti got exposed to local gangs before he even became a teenager. He ended up leading one of the gangs known as the Fulton Rockaway Boys, and at the same time, he was running errands for a local Gambino crime family capo's social club. There, Gotti met his Gambino mentor, Agnello Della Croce, who would show him more about organized crime. By the time he was 16, he had dropped out of high school to work full-time in organized crime, motivating 2 of his brothers, Peter and Gene, who later joined him in the Gambino crime family and became made men. Soon, Gotti's lifestyle and look changed too, earning him the nickname Dapper Don. Gotti stepped out in pricey suits, hand-painted ties, and coordinating pocket squares from the designer Brioni, giving him an uncommon finesse. However, at the time, Gotti didn't make much as Paul Castellano was the leader of the Gambino family. But Gotti would use him as a stepping stone to reach his desired height. Maybe not in the way you must have imagined. He actually killed Paul and took his place as the head of New York's infamous crime syndicate. With the Gambinos being one of the Italian-American Mafia's 5 families, Gotti came into a lot of power very suddenly in 1985. But before then, he had met the love of his life, Victoria DiGiorgio, at a bar in 1958, and the two ended up tying the knot in 1962. Since they met, Victoria has been solidly behind Gotti, and there she was while he overthrew Paul and even got the nickname Teflon Don after he evaded a string of indictments in the 80s. He seemed invincible at the time, escaping several criminal convictions, but even he couldn't evade the law forever. John Gotti was eventually brought down by the feds and several Gambino turncoats in 1992. Federal agents planted hidden recording devices in Gotti's Ravenite social club, capturing audio of his discussions and meetings, which they later used against him. On December 11, 1990, they arrested Gotti and fellow Gambino members Gravano and Frank Locascio. Gotti was charged with 5 murders, including the slayings of Castellano as well as with racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder, illegal gambling, bribery, tax evasion, obstruction of justice, and loan sharking. From his rise into power to his arrest, Victoria stood by him. Although she was born in Italy, her parents immigrated to the United States to work in factories and pursue better opportunities. Things soon changed for the better, when Victoria's mother inherited an ancestral home worth millions, which she later passed down to her daughter. Although she didn't live a life of luxury, Victoria DiGiorgio wasn't completely unaccustomed to money and privilege. Getting to become Gotti's wife in 1962, Victoria's good life got coupled with fame because of her husband. However, her sweet life became sour when their son, Frank, died in an apparent accident. Victoria couldn't escape her grief as she mourned his death for very long. The man responsible for Frank's death reportedly vanished during a family trip, even though he wasn't at fault in the accident. It was, however, speculated that Gotti had ordered a hit on him. Considering how Victoria stood by him, you would think she was all happy about her husband's activities. But no. Victoria was griefed by her husband's activities, but she stood by him all the same. Even after Gotti received a life imprisonment sentence, they remained married until Gotti died in prison on June 10, 2002, when he died of throat cancer in a Springfield, Missouri prison hospital. That was 40 years of dedication and commitment. But what happened after Gotti's death? In a way, Gotti lives on, as one of his 5 children followed in his footsteps and joined the ranks of the Gambino crime family. The other Gotti children largely disassociated themselves from the so-called family business, and, like their mother, stayed out of the limelight. Despite John Gotti's high-profile criminal charges, Victoria DiGiorgio has retained her privacy, staying out of the public eye as much as possible. Victoria must be living okay wherever she is, as she inherited a good chunk of change, boosting her reported net worth to roughly $2 million. Next is Maria Victoria Henao. Born in Palmyra, Colombia in 1961, Maria Victoria Henao met her future husband, Pablo Escobar, the devil himself, at a very young age. If you know anything about Pablo Escobar at all, you would understand why Maria's parents never wanted them to have any relationship whatsoever. No one wanted their children close to the distrusted Escobar, the son of a watchman, who zoomed around their neighborhood on his Vespa. You see, Escobar was exposed to the life of crime at an early age. Soon after his birth, his family moved to Envigado, Colombia, a suburb of Medellin. While still a teenager, he began a life of crime, starting with the sales of fake diplomas, smuggling stereo equipment, and stealing tombstones to resell. That's not all. Escobar also stole cars, and it was this offense that resulted in his first arrest in 1974. Soon, as the cocaine industry grew in Colombia, Escobar became involved in drug smuggling thanks to its proximity to Peru, Ecuador, and Bolivia, places where coca, from which cocaine is derived, is produced. Isn't it surprising how 12-year-old Maria Henao fell in love with the 23-year-old Escobar? In Maria's memoir, she mentioned that Escobar was the first and only love of her life. According to her, Escobar worked hard to seduce her. He gave her gifts, like a yellow bicycle, and serenaded her with romantic ballads. Eventually, they got married, and Pablo Escobar moved on from the petty crimes of his youth. At the time, he was in the early stages of building his drug empire, and about a decade later, he was responsible for 80% of all cocaine sent to the United States as the kingpin of the Medellin cartel. Meanwhile, Henao stood silently by his side. She was told not to do anything other than being Escobar's wife and the mother to his 2 children. She could not ask questions, and neither was she allowed to challenge his choices. Initially, Maria tried to look the other way and simply enjoy her husband's newfound wealth while luxuriating in the high life, enjoying private jets and other things in public. However, in private, she was pained by her husband's involvement in a brutal world of crime. And she was especially tortured by his affairs, as Escobar slept with countless other women. At one point during his marriage to Maria, he even built his own bachelor pad at their house so he could meet his mistresses right under his wife's nose. But of course, infidelity was not even considered a crime, so Maria went through it all in silence. However, Escobar committed serious crimes. As his wealth and power grew, his cartel assassinated Justice Minister Rodrigo Lara, a presidential candidate in 1984, and blew up a commercial airline. At that point, Maria was getting tired of Escobar's violent line of work, especially as life for the family became more regimented. It got to a point when Maria and her children wanted to visit Escobar. They were blindfolded and brought to safe houses by cartel members. Meanwhile, Maria lived in fear of being killed by one of her husband's enemies. But by 1993, it was clear that Escobar's days were numbered. Escobar eventually told Maria that he wanted her and the children to move to a safe house under government protection. That same year, Pablo Escobar was killed on a rooftop in Medellin after being gunned down by Colombian police. No lies, the world celebrated the death of Pablo Escobar, but his family, his wife, son, and daughter, quietly and fearfully mourned. As Colombian police stormed Medellin and rounded up what remained of Escobar's cartel, Maria Victoria Henao and her 2 children packed up their lives and fled to Germany. However, Germany denied them asylum, the same as Mozambique. The family eventually settled in Buenos Aires, Argentina, where the trio then changed their names. Maria Victoria Henao often went by Victoria Henao Vallejos, or Maria Isabel Santos Caballero. And today, she often goes by Victoria Eugenia Henao. But life in Argentina presented new challenges for Pablo Escobar's widow. In 1999, Maria and her son Juan Pablo were both arrested on suspicion of money laundering and imprisoned for several months. Upon her release, Maria told the press that she'd been arrested because of who she was, not because of what she'd allegedly done. She said, "They want to try the ghost of Pablo Escobar because they want to prove that Argentina is combating drug trafficking." After her release, Maria Victoria Henao mostly stayed out of the spotlight for nearly 2 decades. However, in recent years, she has broken her silence about her life with Escobar when she published her book titled, "Mrs. Escobar, My Life with Pablo." The book sheds light on both her infamous husband and her enigmatic character. To Maria, her love for Pablo Escobar remains difficult to reconcile with the terrible things he did. She says that she feels immense sadness and shame for the enormous pain her husband had caused, not only for their family, but for the entire country of Colombia. In a 2018 interview with Colombia's W Radio, Maria publicly apologized for her late husband's reign of terror as she said, "I ask for forgiveness for what I did in my youth." She mentioned that she was not a member of the cartel but still shouldn't have supported crimes. Let's talk about Maria Elvira Murillo, the wife of Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, a famous Mexican powerful drug dealer. You must have heard about Gallardo once or twice, or maybe several times. That's because when talking about powerful drug lords, his name is one of those names that pops up. He was the one who established the modern Mexican drug trade with the branding Guadalajara cartel in the 1980s and stayed in charge of every drug trafficking in Mexico, and also corridors along the US border. His crimes were not limited to trafficking, but were extended to murder. In 1989, Gallardo was convicted of the murder of DEA agent Enrique Camarena, which saw him sentenced to 40 years at the Altiplano maximum security prison. However, due to his declining health, he was transferred to a medium security facility in 2014. But don't be surprised, before he became this famous drug lord, Gallardo worked in the Mexican police as a federal judicial police agent. However, he was someone not content with little. He considered his salary too small and not able to solve even his basic needs, and so he thought of other means. Meanwhile, the department he worked in was infamous for corrupt practices, which is where he started to gain the grounds and guts on how to operate in a world of crime. Eventually, he quit his job and began to work as a bodyguard, where he met Pedro Aviles Perez, who would later become his future drug partner. After some time, they moved into full-time drug peddling, where Gallardo assumed the nicknames The Godfather, or El Padrino, and the Boss of Bosses. The amount of money Gallardo sought but could not get as a police officer came to him in no time by finding several new routes for peddling drugs to different parts of the country. Unfortunately for him, he got arrested in 1989 and was charged with several felonies and murders. While he remains at the medium security prison in Guadalajara, it was once revealed that he got an additional 37 years of jail term added to the original 40 years. This simply means that he was expected to spend 77 years behind bars. However, after 3 decades in jail, he was granted a house arrest by a district judge in 2022 at the age of 76. So what has happened to Maria Murillo all these years? Although Maria is a very private person, she is depicted in the Netflix series, Narcos Mexico, which gives us insight into what her life must have looked like. The thing is, Maria isn't Gallardo's first wife, and neither is she the last. His first wife, whose name and personal information are unknown, died of leukemia in 1968. He then found Maria Murillo, whom he later divorced and finally married Daniela, sometime before his 40th birthday in 1986. According to the Netflix series, Maria was initially very supportive of her husband's drug dealings. However, she stopped being happy with his dealings when he started devoting all his time to running his cartel. And not only that, but also having extramarital relationships with several women and lavishing them with expensive gifts. Maria tried everything she could to convince her husband to run his cartel from their hometown Sinaloa to win him back, but he was adamant about her pleas. As time went on, Gallardo became very cold with her, and later told her that she was not needed anymore. Divorce shortly followed, and Maria got full custody of her children. Later on, after surviving an attempt on his life by the Gulf Cartel, Gallardo flew to Sinaloa in search of Maria, and although she initially refused to reunite with him, they later made up after he successfully rigged the 1988 election in favor of the PRI. However, the joy of their reunion was not for long. It all became sour when Guadalupe Leja Serrano and her 2 children were killed. When Maria Murillo learned that Gallardo had something to do with Guadalupe's death, she violently confronted him and abruptly condemned his acts of brutality. While Gallardo was trying to calm Maria down during a heated exchange of words, she stabbed him with a knife, and this made him leave her forever and go back to Guadalajara. Maria had 17 children with Gallardo, and after the divorce, she took full custody of them all. Although they had their issues, Gallardo and Maria still kept in touch so much so that she knew what he was going through in jail. Back in 2011, Maria Murillo and 2 of her children penned an open letter indicating that he was not getting his proper treatment and was being mistreated in jail. However, it wasn't until 2014 that he was transferred to a medium prison in Guadalajara. Gallardo requested a house arrest back in 2019 also, but his request was not accepted until 2022. Currently, Maria Murillo's location remains undisclosed to the public. Even during her marriage to Gallardo, Maria was adept at maintaining a private life, sharing minimal personal information with the media. Present day, she continues to uphold her lifestyle of staying out of the spotlight. She, however, has her business ventures. She co-owns Delia Real Estate with her ex-husband Miguel Ángel Felix Gallardo. However, following Gallardo's arrest, the Attorney General's office seized the company. Besides that, Maria is said to be the one in charge of her ex-husband's wealth, and at the time of his arrest, the drug lord was worth a whopping $1 billion. This list would be incomplete without El Chapo's wife. Emma Coronel Aispuro. Yeah, El Chapo didn't have one wife, and he had several other women, but Emma Coronel Aispuro was the last before he got captured. You see, El Chapo allegedly got inappropriately intimate with girls as young as 13 years old and called them his vitamins because they gave him life. So it was no wonder when El Chapo said he wanted to marry 17-year-old Emma. The two had first met in 2006 at a local dance when they were introduced to each other. For El Chapo, it was love at first sight, and Emma knew him like any teenager would know someone famous. She saw his wealth, his flashy and abundant lifestyle, and was aware of his notoriety among drug lords. However, Chapo was a homeland hero. Running a cartel, many felt he was the real deal and would put anyone he owned in safety. This was especially true in a town like Canelas, where girls and their families were often anxious for them to marry for financial security and safety. As the local dance got underway, Chapo ordered the band to sing one of his favorite songs, Cruzando Cerros y Arroyos, which means crossing hills and streams, a song aimed at Emma. After the performance, Emma and Chapo talked for half an hour and things started moving really fast. At the time, Emma was dating a local boy from the ranch, but did it really matter? It was El Chapo, and she didn't even have much say. According to Emma's cousin, Alfonso Lopez, Emma was a very serious and centered person who wasn't much of a dating type, but her opinion didn't even matter. One of the reasons is that Emma's family was no ordinary family. Her father, Inés Coronel Barreras, worked for the Sinaloa cartel, along with some other family members. Although the truth was that while her family was particularly enmeshed in the area where she grew up, a cartel connection made them more ordinary than unusual. Another reason was that Chapo outdid himself for Emma's big day. At the annual festival known as La Feria del Café y la Guayaba, named for the region's beloved coffee and guava, 17-year-old Emma was campaigning against 4 other girls to be crowned that year's reina, the queen of the festival in a town of about 800 people. In honor of Emma's candidacy, around 20 small planes and helicopters flew in guests. The streets were crawling with horses, motorcycles, Hummers, and other expensive cars carrying people from prominent traffickers to local politicians, including a member of the federal police, into the gathering. Emma enjoyed great popularity at the time courtesy of El Chapo, and he was even suspected to have paid people off to vote for Emma. Chapo made sure that the event was bigger than all that had been organized before it and all that came after. Emma won the competition with exactly half of the 800 votes, and was later crowned queen in a silky yellow dress. Before leaving the place, Chapo gave Emma's father a Chevy Cheyenne and a Mercedes-Benz topped with a huge bow for Emma. In the mountains, where it's still customary for families to be paid for their daughter's hand, a kind of reverse dowry, Emma was now, quite suddenly, the drug lord's intended wife. And so, on July 2, 2007, her 18th birthday, she was married to Chapo. in what she described as a simple ceremony at her childhood home, surrounded by family and close friends. Fast forward to 14 years later, Emma was looking straight into the camera as she was being booked into the Alexandria Sheriff's Office in Virginia. In the mugshot, law enforcement dispatched to international media, announcing the capture of El Chapo's wife. Emma looked as she felt, tired but resolute. Her February 22, 2021 arrest was an anniversary of sorts. The same day, 7 years before, Mexican Marines escorted her husband in handcuffs after having apprehended him in a Mazatlan apartment where they were staying with their twin daughters. Within days of her own arrest, media rumors would swirl that she was cooperating with federal agents. At the time, Emma was arrested for helping her husband and the cartel, as she was suspected of having been exchanging letters with Chapo and helping him with his escapes over the years. After her arrest, though, people had different opinions. Some believe she was a victim of the cartel who had no choice but to do what she was told, including breaking the law. To others, she was a victim of overzealous U.S. prosecutors eager to make an example of her, likely knowing she couldn't cut a deal with the U.S. government without worrying about the worst kinds of consequences from the cartel if she ever returned to her homeland. And to others still, she wasn't a victim at all, but rather a grown woman who made it rich through her looks and contribution to an international drug syndicate. Whatever happened didn't matter to the authorities. She was accused of passing communications between her husband and 4 of his sons to help her drug lord husband escape from prison. She also knew of the plan to slip him a GPS device, with her youngest brother helping him escape through a tunnel. Emma pleaded guilty to all 3 counts she was charged with, waiving her right to a trial, and was released from U.S. custody in Los Angeles County on September 13, 2023. She was released on 4 years supervised release, which means she's still being watched. Presently, Emma is lying low with no one sure of her next move. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.